What happens to the spirit after we die? A question that has plagued the minds of humankind for millennia, the definitive answer to which we may never find. For most, there is comfort in the notion that life continues in one form or another. Others find peace in the belief that death is the final frontier. But there are many who are unable to shake the sneaky suspicion that as the body withers, the spirit lingers, just beyond the boundaries of our perception.
The Duppy is one of several words referring to either ghost, malevolent spirit, or otherwise someone unsettled in the spirit world.
Those spiritual beings that were once living, so it's the ancestral spirits that have transitioned to the afterlife.
The term Duppy comes from a West African word. I think it's a Tree word, D-O-P-I, same pronunciation, Duppy, which means ghost.
Within Jamaican folklore, the Duppy is very much alive and well. Children walk the streets in fear of Duppies. And generally, the spirit of a dead or deceased individual would be one conceived as roaming the streets, and if you don't do certain things at the passing of that particular person, the spirit is seen to be roaming.
In general, the concept of the Duppy story is used by most societies. Ghost stories are sometimes used as ways to control persons, sometimes to keep children who might be wayward within certain boundaries. Hence, the way in which Duppy stories create a fear of children to wander too far off into the dark. Sometimes they are merged with spiritualities and concepts of morality, of justice, in terms of how many of the stories are constructed. So the Duppy stories are part of how justice from a supernatural space is constructed. Separate and apart from the fact that people do have many times phenomenal experiences that cannot be explained in any other way but as supernatural, then also a lot of the Duppy stories come from their personal experiences.
Based on oral history, Duppies manifest themselves in different ways.
They may come in the form of a relative, a deceased relative, or something else.
The pantheon of spirits in the Jamaican and even wider Caribbean context would include characters such as Rolling Calf, Old Haig, River Muma. River Muma appears in a number of African diasporic religious practices, so that the River Muma would be the goddess of the sea. And whether one would consider that to be Yemoya out of the Yoruba tradition, or related to other deities associated with the sea, Olokun. And in Candomblé there would be a different name. In Santeria you would hear about Yemoya. All of them manifest some kind of element of veneration in terms of a deity that is associated with the water, associated either with the river or with the sea. And when people sometimes drown or things happen at rivers, we associate something negative in terms of whatever spirits haunt that region.
The River Muma is tied up with the folklore of the Spanish presence in Jamaica. And there is the story of the River Muma and this golden table which comes to the top of the water, glistens in the sun, and then submerges again. There's a story of a Taino girl who was captured by the Spanish and was somehow thrown into the river out of their search for gold. In later years, during the enslavement period, there's a planter who now knows of this golden table, decides he wants wealth from this golden table, and decides to go down to the river and to tie his mules and all his slaves to this table when it rises, to pull it out so that he can get the gold, because it's this fabled gold that this table is apparently fashioned from. They are drawn into the water and all drown, including the man. So there is this idea of terror, which is one of the areas of mystique that surrounds the Rio Cobre and the Flatbridge area in particular. People believe that there are forces in the Rio Cobre that will pull you down, and that those forces are connected to the River Muma kind of mystique.
There are significant spaces where that would have been associated with Duppies, in the same way that the River Muma, it is the river. So the Silk Cotton Tree is another location where we would find people talking about Duppies living under those trees. People wouldn't want to walk under those trees. But the Silk Cotton Tree is very significant because it's the same kind of association that's made in some parts of Africa. We didn't just get that in Jamaica. We didn't imagine it. It comes out of a longer history of association with our African past.
So the cotton tree is where it is believed that the Duppies reside. It is actually in line with the West African belief, and so that has persisted in the Caribbean. While it is that it is the dwelling place, considered to be the dwelling place of the Duppies, it can also be a place for capturing Duppies. There are stories that Obia men will visit graves at a certain time of the night, or they will go to a cotton tree to do this. And it is said that one of the ways in which it is done is that the person who desires catching the Duppy would visit the tree at a particular time and use, I think it would be a mixture of grave dirt and some other some concoction that will include grave dirt that would be placed there, and the Duppy would be summoned and would recognize that the person is in need of assistance.
On the road to our home, there was a silk cotton tree, and one night I heard, I kid you not, a sound that is equal to the worst thunder or lightning that you would have ever heard recently. And in the still of the community, people wondered, what is that sound? It was horrible. What was it? There was a hurricane, and during the hurricane, the root structure around the tree had worn, and the tree came down in the night, straight across the road. When we looked at the tree the next day, we saw long nails in the tree, 6-inch nails that had been hammered in, and some of them were exposed, and if you looked at the nails, you saw persons' names written on the nails, or you saw pieces of old paper sticking out from the nails, and I wondered what was happening. And then someone from the community explained that what happens is that people, when they want to do someone some evil, they would write their names on these things and drive it into the tree, because the silk cotton tree is where ghosts would live, and that the spirits from the tree would beset the persons whose names were written down. That was eerie for me.
Duppy can be either good or bad. It depends on the person making the request.
The perception of the good Duppy and the bad Duppy exists. There's also the perception of a thing called the day ghost. The day ghost is a presence that is supernatural, but for some reason is able to walk up and down in the day. The name Old Haig was introduced to me by my parents in a very simple domestic way. We were told that we cannot sleep with a broom in our room, in our bedrooms, because if we do so, Old Haig would ride us. The Old Haig imagery is also about a woman who is not what she appears to be. She will present in one way, she's devious. Her aim, like any witch in a narrative of a witch, is nefarious and sinister. She is intending to lure unwitting men in particular, and many times will present as a beautiful young woman, as again many of the fairy tales of Europe would have those narratives. And her aim is through sexual allure in particular to capture men who are promiscuous, who are not chaste in their behavior or in their pattern. So the Old Haig is a kind of revenge image that is seen as, again, a way to warn men who are promiscuous to be careful. I can tell you of the reign of the Black Art Man. The Black Art Man was a real figure. He captured that narrative of making sure that children were not out late at night, or were not where they were not supposed to be, or weren't alone out on the road. And there were many children I knew who were really genuinely afraid of the Black Art Man. In that rural area during that period of time when I grew up, there were not many persons who owned a motor car. When a motor car came through the community, everyone, especially children, would step onto the bank of the road and waited until the car passed. So I found it curious, as someone coming from Kingston, that people stopped, stood on the bank and then looked. And then I understood more when I heard the narrative of the Black Art Man. So the idea of going on the bank and stopping and looking was to be able to see if you needed to run off into the bushes, down into some wherever and hide. And there were always shortcuts and trails leading off of the main road for the community. And we knew by description what the Black Art Man was, what he looked like. He was a man who drove a black tinted car. You could not see on the inside. He wore a suit, a hat. He wore sunshades in the whether dead of night or in the middle of the day, and he was this clandestine figure whose aim was to steal children away. It's interesting because in those days we didn't have children going missing, but today so many children are going missing, and one wonders at the social good that the idea of the Black Art Man might have done, even though it was a myth. How much that came out of the fact that maybe there had been incidents, rare though they were, that were traumatic to the community, to the point that it was not seen as a natural, normal behavior. It was seen as wickedly supernatural behavior. Because when I look back at the narrative of the Black Art Man, there is nothing in it that denotes any other supernatural power. So for me, what is supernatural is the extent to which a community recognize extreme diabolical behavior as evil as from Satan. Possessions also form a part of the Duppy personas, but there are also other elements which form a presence, a ghostly presence. So there are certain smells that people ascribe to as ghostly smells in the night, or certain sounds, or certain phenomena such as thunderbolts and that kind of thing that have supernatural connections to how they're explained in the space.
At the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, one of the important aspects of our work is our social history research, where we go into the communities and we get stories from mostly the elderly, and accounts of encounters with Duppies are included in some of the testimonies that we get. It is believed that Duppies can possess people, and when they do, the human body is not able to withstand the possession, and so it will manifest itself in different ways. People will describe particular heat that comes over them.
When someone says, boy, them hair raise, they feel the hair on the back of their head getting, standing on end, or their head getting bigger, they feel like their head is getting big. That for them is the presence of a spiritual, oftentimes unwanted guest. You wouldn't hear them talking about a good spirit necessarily in that kind of way. There is the idea of using spirits, using rum as a way to appease the Duppy as well. So if you sprinkle rum in an area, you're appeasing the Duppy. There are ways in which some people do use preventative measures. So when they eat, they leave some of the food in their plate behind, as a way of saying they're leaving the food for them other one. So wherever there is a home, as is in many of our rural areas with graves behind the house, there are times when the elders of the house or members of the household will take plates of food and set on the grave for the deceased. In some rituals for revival, for example, there is also the way in which there is, when the table is set, it understands spirits. Now, I don't want to offend the revivalists by equating the term Duppy and spirits, but we're really talking about spiritual beings, which some people use the term Duppy to denote.
In terms of activities that would be very important, funeral practices, for example, we in Jamaica there's a strong tradition around the 9th night, and in colloquial usage we talk about the 9-night. So we know that there's something significant about 9. The tradition around the 9th night is that there is a send-off And usually the funeral would be on the 10th. The 9th night is where you would see all of these, various dances, the family coming together. Everybody would have flown in. And the idea is to celebrate that ancestor and to give them a send-off befitting of the life and their contribution. That's something very important, that we begin as people to really reflect even more on how it is we celebrate our ancestors.
To understand the existence of the Duppy culture in the Jamaican history, or in Caribbean history as a matter of fact, you have to understand traditional West African beliefs. So that is where this practice is, belief is derived. And that is a recognition that ancestral spirits are important, play an important part in everyday life, in the life of the living. In West African traditional belief, ancestral spirits are not worshipped. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding sometimes that they're worshipped. They're venerated, right? And there's a difference. But there is a recognition that there's a supreme being. For example, if you consider Kumina practice, Kumina religion recognizes King Zambi as that supreme being, right? There are lesser spirits, right? And there's more interaction with those lesser beings because God is considered to be very distant. So the ancestral spirits, there is more communication with these ancestral spirits, interaction with these ancestral spirits, because they're viewed as more accessible, and they play a part in helping to direct the everyday lives of humans. So I'll give you an example in terms of the Eto culture. And the Eto people are Yoruba descendants who reside in Hanover. In the Eto culture, there is the belief that the spiritual beings, the Duppys, or they refer to them as the Oku. The Okus are present and they can see everything that you do. In the Eto practice, the Oku, or the Duppys, are seen as a vital part of everyday life. And because they're amongst the community tries to ensure that they don't do anything to dishonor the Oku or the spirits.
My ultra scary experience would be my trip to Caldwell. There's a place in Westmoreland, the border of Westmoreland and Hanover. There's a set of people called the Eto people who came from, I think, West Nigeria, and they actually are still practicing the Eto thing in Caldwell. If you're not aware of that, you can Google it. So they have a thing called the dinner play. A dinner play is done. It's a similar thing to what we call nine-night or dead yard, like setup. The Eto people call it a dinner play. So they're doing it for somebody that passed on like a long time ago. So I'm going to give you the series of events. It was like a whole, it was like from 9 o'clock in the day until about 1 o'clock in the night. And I had to record consistently to capture the whole thing. So I was there from in the day. And they killed a goat. They cut the goat head off. And they're cooking 3 pots. 1 pot is for the family of the deceased. 1 pot is for the visitors. And then 1 pot is for the Oku, the person that is dead. And they caught the blood in a container. And they mix the blood with a rated coal in it. We call it busy. And that is rest on the table. And some of the blood is on the ground, where the blood is. This is going to be after 6, after we eat. This is going to be where everybody's going to dance. Everybody that's related to the deceased come up, and then the king dips his hand in the blood and make a cross on their forehead and on the back of their neck. But because I want to get like authentic footage for you people to see, I actually went into the line with the people, the family, and I went up to the table and he's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm recording it." So I recorded stuff, and then he put the blood on my forehead and on my and on my back of my head. I don't think that was a good idea. I got tired because I've been recording all day and the camera is very big and heavy. So I'm like, yo, I need to go lay down and rest a little bit. And one of the dude who's related to the person who's dead, he said, "You can go use my house way down in like a gully, like it's far down in the gully." And I went down there to have a nap. I fell asleep for a couple of minutes. And then all of a sudden, I started hearing like some sounds. Like I started hearing like a crowd of people, like, you know, like whispering, like whispering sound. And I kid you not, I'm telling you, I opened my eyes, and I'm not hallucinating. I opened my eyes and there was like a huge crowd of people in the house looking at like, and I remember seeing an old lady like was in the back of the line, and she was like, "Who is it?" And like she's doing this and looking up. Yeah, I'm getting chills talking about this. I saw this old lady looking over at me like this, and they were standing at the door, and I'm like, "Yo, how the hell am I gonna get out?" And then I just jump up, stand up, and then I just like turn my head sideways and just run towards the door, run towards them and run towards the door. But I was running through people, you know. I was running. It's a big crowd of people. That was the scariest experience I've ever had in my entire life.
That space of transition is extremely important. The transition from life into a space of the spirit world. I don't even refer to it as death so much anymore. Because going back to the spirit world means that there is that fluid movement of replenishing your energy, replenishing your physical being. This spirit world is one that we are constantly in touch with by various means. Dreams, we have people coming from the spirit world telling us things, whether it's a near-death experience or not. And we ought not to be afraid. We ought not to be afraid. We ought not to be fearful. I think when we become fearful, it is because of the ways in which Christianity, denominations such as those within the Christian tradition have taught us. So where would we be as a people if we had no stories? Really and truly, the retention of our African past certainly has been enhanced by the tradition of storytelling. Very significant tradition. And of course, Duppy stories are a major part of that tradition. The significance of Duppy stories in our contemporary Jamaican practice, I think is waning, but that we need to definitely continue to strengthen the ways in which we pass on knowledge about our ancestral world, the ancestral world and our ancestral heritage.